If everything you thought you knew about this family was only half the story, not the half about the scandal, not the headlines, not the courtroom, the other half, the quieter half, one that never made the news. Because here's the thing about a system built on image. It doesn't just hide the bad, it hides the complicated. It hides the human. It hides the truth about the people who were shaped by it before they ever had a chance to shape themselves. This is the story of the Duggars, but not the version you've already seen. This is the version about what a system does to the people living inside it. All of them, including the ones who never got to leave. If you grew up watching television in the 2000s, you know the name. The Duggar family, Jim, Bob, and Michelle. 19 children, a sprawling home in Arkansas, a reality show that ran for years on TLC under names like 17 Kids and Counting, then 18, then 19 and Counting. They were everywhere. Magazine covers, morning show appearances, brand built on wholesomeness, faith, and the idea that this family had found a way to live that the rest of the world had forgotten. Millions of people believed it. But here's what the cameras didn't linger on. The Duggars weren't just a large family with strong values. They were participants in a specific, structured ideology. A movement known informally as the Quiverful movement, combined with the teachings of Bill Gothard's Institute in Basic Life Principle, or IBLP. This wasn't casual faith. This was a complete system. A system with rules about courtship, about education, about the role of women, about how children should be raised, disciplined, and prepared for a life inside that same framework. Like all systems, it didn't ask for consent from the people born into it. Let's talk about what this system actually looked like from inside, because this is where the story gets more complicated than most coverage has been willing to go. ILP, the organization whose teachings heavily shaped the Duggar household, has since been the subject of multiple lawsuits and investigations. Bill Gothard himself resigned in 2014 following allegations of sexual harassment and misconduct involving dozens. A lawsuit filed in 2016 named him directly. This is documented. This is verified. What often gets lost in that story is what his teachings produced inside the homes of his followers. Members, and there are thousands of them, many of whom have spoken publicly through organizations like Recovering Grace, describe an environment where questioning authority was equated with spiritual failure, where girls and women were taught their primary purpose was submission and service, where homeschooling was used not just for education, but to limit outside influence. And here's where it gets strange. Because the Duggar children didn't just grow up in the system, they were presented to the world as proof that it worked. Every smile on that television show was, intentionally or not, an advertisement, and that changes everything about how we should read the people in those frames. Now let's talk about what the public record actually tells us, because this part matters. In 2015, investigative reporting revealed that Josh Duggar, the eldest son, had been investigated by police in 2006 for molesting multiple underage girls, including several of his own sisters. The statute of limitations had expired. No charges were filed at that time. The family's handling of this, routing the situation through church leadership rather than law enforcement, sending Josh to a program run by a family friend rather than qualified professional, was documented in police reports that were later obtained and published. Then in 2021, Josh Duggar was arrested on federal charges related to the possession and receipt of child sexual abuse material. In 2022, he was convicted and sentenced to over 12 years in federal prison. These are facts. They are in the court record. Here's what those facts point to beyond Josh himself. Multiple people in positions of authority, including his parents, were aware of earlier behavior and chose a response that prioritized the family's reputation and their ideological framework over the safety of the children involved. That is not speculation. That is what the documented timeline shows, and it raises a question that goes beyond any single person. What does a system have to look like from the inside to produce that response? This is where we need to talk about Jana. Not as a villain, not as a hero, as a person. Jana Duggar is the oldest daughter, born in 1990. She spent her entire visible public life at home, unmarried, managing the household, helping raise her younger siblings. The internet spent years speculating about why she hadn't married, making jokes, asking questions that, in retrospect, were pointing at entirely the wrong thing. Because researchers who study high-control religious environments, people like Dr. Stephen Hassan, who developed the BITE model for identifying coercive control, consistently find something specific about the oldest daughters in these households. They don't just follow the system. They are often required to embody it. They become the secondary caregivers, the household managers, the visible proof that the ideology produces capable, willing, cheerful women. And they are often the last to leave, not because they believe the most deeply, but because the system has given them the fewest tools to imagine a life outside it. Jill Duggar left, and in her memoir, Counting the Cost, co-written with her husband Derek Dillard and published in 2023, she described the cost in real terms. Loss of income, the family had controlled the money from the show, loss of relationship with her parents, a years-long process of unlearning and rebuilding. Jana Duggar left. Her book, The Hope We Hold, and later Becoming Free Indeed, described her own process of examining and ultimately rejecting the specific teachings she grew up with. Both of them describe the system as the source of the harm. Not a single person, the system. And Jana, who has not written a memoir, who has not given those interviews, stayed. What does that silence mean? We don't know, and that matters. We genuinely do not know. But here's what we do know. In the past few years, there have been quiet shifts. Life that looks slowly, like it might be opening up, travel, projects, a relationship that eventually became a marriage. Small things, but in the context of where she came from, not small at all. Here's the part that doesn't make the headlines. When a controlling system finally fractures, and this one has publicly and irreversibly, the people who get the most scrutiny are usually the ones who left dramatically, the ones who wrote the books, gave the interviews, filed the lawsuits, and that scrutiny is deserved. Their stories needed to be told. But the people who stayed, quietly, without explanation, are often carrying something the public never fully sees. Think about what Jana's life looked like from the inside. Born into a structure she didn't choose, and assigned a role before she was old enough to evaluate it. Watched her family become a global brand. Watched her brother's crimes become international. Watched her sisters leave and speak. And through all of it, silence. That silence can mean many things. Belief, fear, loyalty, grief. Processing that hasn't finished yet. But what it almost certainly doesn't mean, based on everything we know about how these systems work, is that she was the architect of any of them. She was inside it, like the rest of them. So what happens next? Several of the Duggar siblings are still navigating what their lives look like outside, or partially outside, the world they were raised in. The legal consequences for Josh Duggar are settled. The personal consequences for everyone around him are not. In the larger story about IBLP, about the Quiverful movement, about the thousands of other families shaped by the same teachings who never had a camera pointed at them, that story is still unfolding. There are former members speaking out. There are researchers documenting. There are lawsuits still working through courts. The Duggar story was never just about the Duggars. It was about what happens when an ideology gets a platform, a production budget, and a decade of primetime television. What it leaves behind are the people who grew up inside the frame. The easiest version of this story is the one with a clear villain and a clear victim. But the truest version is more uncomfortable than that, because systems don't just harm the people they target. They shape the people they rely on, they use the compliant, they depend on the ones who stay, and sometimes the person who looks the most embedded is the one who had the least choice about being there. Jana Duggar's full story hasn't been told yet. Maybe it never will be publicly. If you're someone who grew up watching that show and thinking, something about this doesn't quite add up, you were right. The question was never what any one person did. The question was always, what kind of system produces? And are we paying enough attention to all the other systems? Quieter, less famous, doing the same thing right now? Think about that. And let me know what you think.